Speech by Susan Lawrence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Philippa Jevons. Speech given to the House of Commons on June the 27th, 1927, by Susan Lawrence. I know a little better now than to appeal to the Minister of Health on grounds of pity and humanity, but I feel that we have a right to get from the Minister the strict observance of the law. The Minister is very fond of appealing to the law when boards of guardians step a little beyond the law, moved by motives of philanthropy and charity. That is right and as it should be. But what I have to complain about is that the Minister encourages the West Ham Board of Guardians habitually to break the law of England with regard to outdoor relief. The law is clear and plain. Fathers and mothers must maintain their children, children must maintain their parents, but there is no obligation of any kind upon brothers to maintain brothers or upon sisters to maintain sisters. But the whole policy of this Board of Guardians is to attach the earnings of brothers and sisters to keep other members of the family who are not legally dependent upon them. If these people knew their job, they could get out of it, but they trade upon the benevolent feelings of brothers and sisters, and cast the whole care of maintaining the younger members of the family upon the sisters and brothers. There are the children of soldiers who have been killed in the war, to whom the government have given pensions, and this Board of Guardians have thrown them upon the maintenance of their step-brothers, step-sisters, and step-fathers. When the government were deciding what we ought to give to the children of men who died in the service of the country, they considered very carefully what was the proper sum to give, so that these children could get a proper upbringing. I will give two cases. Those cases I brought to the notice of the Minister, and he knows they are perfectly genuine. There were 4 children of a soldier who was killed, and the government gave the children pensions. One of them died, and there are 3 of them left. They have, in the form of pensions, 23 shillings and 6pence a week, while one of them is earning 12 shillings a week. Later the mother married, and there are 2 children of the later marriage. To the father, the mother, and the 2 younger children, the guardians give 8 shillings in kind, and 5 shillings in money, 13 shillings altogether. The orphans of the soldier have to maintain their mother, their stepfather, and the 2 step-children. One of the bedrooms they have sublet for 4 shillings and 6pence a week, because they have so little money for food, and therefore the soldiers' children have nothing like the bedroom space which would make children happy and healthy. The bedrooms of the soldiers' orphans have been taken away from them in order that the other members of the family may have enough to eat. There is another case of a similar kind where the 3 orphans of a soldier have 17 shillings and 6pence a week as pensions, and earn 10 shillings a week. The mother married, and there is another child of the second marriage. They get 4 shillings a week in kind from the guardians, and 4 shillings a week in cash, and the rent is 4 shillings and 2pence a week. They let one of the rooms, and again the sleeping accommodation of a soldier's orphans has been filched from them, because there is no money to feed the rest of the family. When the country voted all that amount of taxation in order that soldiers' orphans should be properly treated, it did not mean that they should be all herded into one room. This is the more wicked on the part of the Minister, because the members of the former Board of Guardians faced up to cases of this kind. In 1922 they communicated with the Ministry of Pensions, and the Minister of Pensions wrote a letter to them which determined their policy. He said, the pensions for the children of the soldier should be expended for their sole benefit. That was not what the Labour Minister said, but what the Conservative Minister said in 1922, and that is the common sense of the matter. This money was never voted to go in indiscriminate relief to the relations of soldiers' orphans. We voted this money in order that the children of men who died in the war might be decently and healthily brought up. Here, in those 2 cases, the money is being filched from them, and they are being housed in a way which is not wholesome and decent. That is what the Minister is doing. I now come to more general matters. The Minister is very fond of saying, when certain cases are brought before him, that he cannot interfere with the discretion of the Boards of Guardians. But we know that the Minister has power to issue general regulations. The old West Ham Board of Guardians, when they had to deal with an old person, gave 15 shillings a week. You cannot get a room in West Ham for less than 5 shillings or 4 shillings and sixpence a week. The new Board of Guardians have cut down the maximum scale for single persons to 11 shillings a week. If you have to pay 5 shillings or 4 shillings and sixpence a week for a room, how can you live and obtain food, firing and clothing and everything else on the balance of 11 shillings? It is not possible to do it. I knew some of these cases, and I know that people are suffering from hunger, and that in the winter they were suffering from cold as a direct result of the regulations laid down by the present Board of Guardians. Some time or other these people will take a chill, they will not have the strength to throw it off, and though the medical certificate will be that death was caused by pneumonia or bronchitis, the real cause will be starvation because of regulations carried out under the auspices of the Minister of Health. I have got here in my hand the report of the West Ham Union, which has been printed in His Majesty's Stationery Office. I do not know what authority Parliament gives to the Minister of Health to print the reports of local government authorities. It is certainly a nice way for the local authorities to save money. If he would consider extending that to the Poplar Borough Council, it would take a bit off the Poplar rates, and we would feel greatly obliged to him. They draw the attention of the world in general to the amount which they have saved in salaries and wages. They have saved something like £15,000 in salaries, and they have done it partly by making the nurses work longer hours than any women engaged in nursing ought to do. When I challenged the Minister about this, the Minister denied it, and then I put a question to him, and he had to admit that what I said was true. It is put down also in the report of the West Ham Board of Guardians. The nurses used to have at the Central Infirmary, not everywhere, but at the Central Infirmary, where the work is very heavy, they used to have a 48-hour week, which meant that they had a day off to recuperate. The new Board of Guardians have given the nurses a 56-hour week, which means that they do not get a clear day. The West Ham Board of Guardians did not, as they ought to have done, give all the nurses in all their institutions a 48-hour week. At Whipps Cross the nurses have worked more than 48 hours a week, but in the Central Infirmary, where the heavy cases are nursed, they had only a 48-hour week. I want the committee to remember that there is no such heavy nursing as the nursing in a workhouse infirmary. At West Ham the nursing is very much heavier than in London, because in London the Poor Law Guardians send the very distressful cases to the sick asylums of the Metropolitan Asylums Board. They do not keep in the workhouses in London the cancer cases and the cases of venereal disease. West Ham does, and in these extreme cancer cases it is not merely that the patient is dying from cancer, but very heavy work is demanded of the nurses. If a person dying from cancer is of any weight, the nurses have to shift the patient continually, or the poor wretch is tormented with bed sores as well as with cancer, so that a nurse who is nursing a dying cancer case has not merely the ordinary work of nursing, but a great deal of heavy lifting and moving, and, if that work is not done, the patient suffers very acutely and painfully. Nurses and sick attendants are only human beings, and in that atmosphere of death, because there is nothing so depressing to the mind of a woman or a man as to be dealing with chronic cases that cannot recover, that only leave the institution by death, to be replaced by fresh chronic cases who in 3 or 4 months will die too, there is no work so dispiriting. And if the nurses do not have a short working week, they cannot give the care and attention that they should. They cannot give the patients those little attentions that are so necessary. They cannot keep up the sort of atmosphere of hopefulness which it is their duty to keep up. Of all the things that the Minister has done, I think one of the most petty, one of the economies which is most bitter today, is the lengthening of the working week of the nurses at the Central Institution from 48 to 56 hours. This is not the first time that the Minister has heard about it. It is in the report here, it was put to him in this House, it was put to him by question and answer. He knows all about it, and he knows that the unions representing these nurses and sick attendants came to him and argued the case. They pointed out that in other boards of guardians, where the work was not so heavy, in London boards of guardians, in Hackney, I think, and some others, because the nursing work is by its nature dispiriting, and because women cannot keep up a proper attitude